The monthly economic report, if you don't know what it is, this comes out, as the name suggests, once a month. And it covers all of the economic information, or a lot of economic information that you would want to know about the world of EVE Online. And so this is basically what we look forward to every month, because it gives us an idea of where the economy stands. And that's very, very important. It's like reading the Wall Street Journal, but you only get it once a month, right? So, and full disclosure, I haven't looked at it at all, so I'm looking at it for the first time. I saw earlier that it went live, and I, went on with my daily life, got online, went on stream, opened it up. So I have no idea what this says. So we're going to have a two-way discussion here. It always starts with production versus destruction versus mining. This is a very central thing that about EVE Online, because this is what makes EVE Online go around. If there's no destruction, then there's very little need for production, and if there's no production, then there's very little need for mining. If any one of these completely falls off, then the others fall over. So this is why it's very important, and this is why this is the first graph of the monthly economic report. Now we can also see the spread here between the various parts of space, so wormholes, nullsec, lowsec, highsec, and Pochven. And so what we can see here is a continued decline in production over the last few months. Right, so after this is where we had the expansion, the Viridian expansion. No, the last expansion uprising was here. So there was also an uprising in production, and now it's been dropping down quite steadily. Even though we did have new tier 2 dreads released in the Viridian expansion, but that isn't. That increased production isn't really reflected here, so it doesn't seem to have a big impact here. But probably also because there's not a big war going on. A lot of these graphs are also driven by conflict in EVE Online. So when there's no large war going on and no large battles, then you have less destruction and less need for production in the turnaround. In these quiet times, there's much more mining going on. So we go down here. You can see here that right now there is a lot of mining going on, or there's an increase in mining. Mining is higher than it has been all year. So this is the highest point of mining of all year. And in terms of destruction, it's also slowly going down. So what you would expect here is this is a ramp up of mining to go into the tier 2 dread construction that we might hopefully see in the next month. As Nivos says in chat here that those BPCs need to be invented. So we'll see that next month, though. It's probably right. And yes, Sergorak is also probably right in that the increase in mining probably also has to do with the event, which had a mining component in it. We had quite a few events here lately. One of the events was the faction warfare construction of the, what are they called, the ship. Somebody help me out here. Ship casters, fleet casters, something like that. Ship casters. There we go. And the other was the Capsuleer Day event. So we've had a lot of events. But yeah, certainly, I think it's a lot of people, when there's no war, they also turn to mining. At least some do. Ship catapults, ship death traps, yeah. So what we're seeing in mining, there's a lot of increase. There's an increase in nullsec mining. So the increase in mining is mainly in nullsec. The increase in destruction is quite a bit in highsec here, but that might have to do with the TTT battles. And in production, there's not really a change here over the last few months. Oh yeah, I need to restart the raffle. Sorry, here. There you go. There's a new raffle going. So that is that. I don't really care about that. This is the various types of asteroids that can be or types of things that can be mined in EVE Online. This is for asteroid ore, which has been going down a little bit. Gas also rather trending down. Ice about flat, and so there must be an increase in moon ore mined. Moon ore is mostly used in tier 2 manufacturing, so that does make sense if it's a ramp up for tier 2 dread production, partly, right? But maybe for the event, you guys have to tell me. I don't know what was being mined for the event, but this is certainly the increase has been in moon ore, and that's not surprising. If we're looking at, you know, where are the different raw material categories positioned right now. If you look at you know, this column right here is the Oz price index, so that's how is the current price level of that category compared to the yearly average. And you can see that raw moon materials are actually trading right now at 150% of yearly average, so 50% above yearly average. That's also because the base was rather low, but that shows you how much the price has increased, and that also means that it's more lucrative now to mine moon materials, right? As opposed to basic minerals that are basically just trading 10% above yearly average, ice at yearly average, and gas 20% over. So there's really a big incentive now again to mine raw moon materials, which there wasn't in the last month a lot of times, because they were just too cheap. Now let's move down here. The reason I'm skipping over stuff right here is because there's no surprise where market trades happen. It's the Forge and then nothing. This is the best and my favorite graph. Let's see here. So this is looking at ISK sinks and faucets. ISK sinks and faucets are what regulates the money supply in EVE Online. Now, you might, if you're a regular player that doesn't look at the MER often, you might not think daily about the macroeconomic factors that go into how much ISK is CCP letting into the game and how much is flowing out of it. This has to be controlled, right? The reason this has to be controlled is because if there's a massive influx of ISK into the system, then what we see is inflation. Think about it this way. If everyone gets massive amounts of money, anyone can suddenly pay higher prices for basically all goods. And so what happens is people outbid each other, prices rise, and that's the definition of inflation. And so when we see the money supply increase over long periods of time, that's exactly what happens, and that's something that CCP actually doesn't want to do. As economies in the real world don't want inflation, CCP doesn't want inflation either, because it devalues people's savings and past achievements, for example. So I like how Crota, the monetarist definition of inflation, yes. There are at least two differing theories of why inflation happens and how bad it is. Probably, I'm also not an. I only play an economist in EVE Online. Apparently, contrary to Crota here, who is better versed in real life economics. Now, in terms of, you know, what are the big influxes and outflows when we talk about ETH? So the by far the biggest influx of ETH is 57 trillion that come in through blue loot and red loot. So this is people ratting and looting things that can be sold to NPC buy orders. In that case, that is basically making ISK out of thin air. And so if there's a ton of ratting going on at any point in time, then we also have a lot of ISK coming into the game, because there's no fluctuation in the NPC buy price for wormhole loot, for example, or trig loot from Abyssal Space. It doesn't fluctuate. It's always the same. So the more people run it, you know, there's no limit. There's at least no hard limit on the Abyssal, the Abyssal Space that people, the number of Abyssal instances that people can run. So technically they can generate infinite amounts of money. The only limit there is the number of players and the time in the day. And so this is the blue loot and red loot is making up ISK out of thin air. So somebody there says it's not thin air. People use ships, modules, and sometimes lose them. That's true, but losing ships and modules doesn't constitute an ISK sink. Actually, people, it's easy to fall into that line of thinking, but it's in the same way not an ISK sink as in mining is not an ISK faucets. Mining itself, the act of mining itself, doesn't create any value in EVE Online. It doesn't generate any ISK, because if you were to endlessly mine a raw material in EVE Online and put it all on the market, you would essentially drown the price through the supply that you're putting onto the market. They buy them from the market where they pay taxes, which is an ISK sink. That is true. That is a very, very different, theory, though, because that is a very small fraction of that, and also they don't have to buy it on the market. They could be also manufacturing it themselves, buying it through contracts, or buying it from their corp friends. So absolutely right. If they do buy it on the market, then there is a small-ish faucet or a sink associated with it, but it's different. Anyway, so we have a lot of ISK coming in. By the way, about half of that is C5, C6 wormholes. So C5, we'll see that later in a graph. That's where a lot of the blue loot comes from. Bounties then are the next, and then we have some smaller ones like invasions, incursions, and ESS main banks. So this is the way that ISK enters EVE Online, and then we have, as Tedric just mentioned, we have the transaction tax, which is the biggest outflow, right? Broker fee similarly. So broker fee and transaction tax often go hand in hand. Transaction tax is what you always pay. It's the sales tax you pay on an item that you sell on the markets in EVE Online. That is applied to whether it's a Citadel or an NPC station, all the same. The broker fee differs based on where you sell, what you're standing in, is a whole lot of things. Also your skills. And so those two are the biggest ones, because they are applied to the 17 odd trillion that is traded in EVE Online every single month. So this is very important, because there was a tax holiday for half the month. The sales tax was halved. So This huge transaction tax fell away to a large degree, and so when you're looking at the beginning of the month ISK or money supply, which is 1,865 trillion, and you add the faucets, the absolutely massive 143 trillion, and you subtract the sinks, then you would have had a massive increase in money supply. Luckily, or unluckily, depending on how you look at it, we had a pretty significant active ISK delta, a negative one, and that's the ISK that is either confiscated through bans, for example, or and I suspect that's the bigger part is people that become inactive. That means that they haven't logged into the game in 3 months. So, it's you have to look at the money supply in EVE Online as something that is a snapshot in time. It's not necessarily the truth for every point in time over the month, because you could have very a bunch of veterans coming back on one day and they would immediately reactivate a large fortune. Is there any line for ISK in escrow, like a courier contract in operation over the month end? A line for ISK in escrow, like a courier in operation over the month end? No, I think that's just treated as still in game, all right? But I'm not sure. I can't, I would have to go through the little ones. Either way, it's not significant. I'm not sure. So, I mean, there's a way that we can look at. So when people are saying this inflation is this is a huge increase in money supply, we can put that into relation by looking at this graph. So this is the MER and Power BI by our friend Matthew. And so here we can look at the active ISK delta, for example. This right now is looking only at the active ISK delta. You can see that typically it's negative. It's only very, very positive when there's a large chunk of people returning all at the same time, like you had, for the expansions. These are the two expansions where you see clearly people are returning from a longer hiatus, right? So that's the active ISK delta. If we're looking at faucets, you can see that they have been increasing quite steadily over the last 2 years here. And if we compare that to the sinks, they have also increased quite significantly. So I think if we can we put it all together? If we put it all together, then what do we have here? The 19 trillion increase in money supply isn't really out of the ordinary. So this is not rampant inflation. Like what we did have in May was insane, but that's because a lot of people are returning, and November the same. But this is not what it looks like when there's rampant inflation. So I'm not too worried about the money supply in EVE Online right now. I don't know. I saw some comments like that floating around. I think probably on Reddit somewhere, but this is not out of the ordinary. It's actually the same as it has been the last 5 or 6 months. Do we see the increased supply reflect in the market proportionally? Is it more contained to Plex? Do we see the increased supply reflect in the market proportionally? Is supply... I'm not sure I understand your question. I'm sorry, Consciencia. Can you rephrase it? I know you mean is supply, but I don't understand the question. Look at the ISK supply over time. It's been going up much steeper than normal for a few months. I mean, sure. So, like there used to be a lot of month where we actually had a negative, you know, a negative. So lately, almost everyone. I know it's in the MER, Golden. I know it's in the MER. I know the MER very well. Trust me. All I'm saying is, you know, if this is an easier way to look at it, because here you can basically compare the amount of red we used to have, that's the decrease in money supply, and the amount of green or bluish green you see here. And it's already clear by this graph that naturally we used to have many more months where we had a negative money supply, which negative money supply isn't necessarily a good thing, right? It's not like it values up your money, but yeah. We'll get to the money supply graph here in a second. I don't want to skip any graphs. Congratulations, ZD Carrison, for winning that 3-day Omega code, man. You can send me a message on Twitch or Discord. Here's a link, and I'll start it in the raffle. Let me read chat real quick. Plex doesn't create ISK. No, it doesn't actually. It does not. Does CCP provide info on how much ISK is held by characters going inactive? Would be quite interesting data. No, but I mean you can see it, right? I mean, I don't think they do a lot of banning every month, right? They have they have ban waves every once in a while, but I think most of the active ISK delta is people going inactive. The more ISK people have, supposedly items are supposed to trend upwards as well. Inflation is tied to actual goods. So do we see a set of goods increase in costs that can be tied directly to increased ISK printing? You can look at the overall price levels. That's what I do here. So if you're looking at the overall price level, for example, compared to the yearly average, we're up 4% over price level. That isn't really something that people notice. It's not really a big problem. But that's because inflation is not just the money supply. Okay, inflation is a function of money supply and ISK velocity. So printing ISK doesn't mean anything, because let me give you this explanation. If somebody does C5, C6 ratting all day and sits on 10 trillion ISK, right? After a few months, they're sitting on 10 trillion ISK, and they're sitting in their wormhole, and they're not doing anything with it. They're just sitting on 10 trillion ISK. That right there is an increase in money supply, but it doesn't change anything about inflation, right? So in order to have inflation, you need to have an increased money supply and a velocity of ISK, meaning ISK exchanging hands, because only when people gather ISK and spend ISK does it have a direct impact on the market, right? And that's where it increases prices. You can have inflation with a steady money supply if you just have an increased, an insane increase in the velocity of ISK, for example, right? So if just trading goes into hyperdrive and you're just basically getting more mileage out of the existing money supply, then you can also have inflation. So it's not as simple as, ooh, more money in, higher prices. That's actually not what it is. And I think that's a very interesting, I mean, I know I'm a nerd, but, I think that's a very interesting concept when thinking about inflation. All right. This is commodities over time. So we see that blue loot in green and red loot in blue. Sleeper components is what you would call blue loot. And you can see how massive it is. It's, It's running at about 0.8 trillion a day. Massive, massive influx. This miscellaneous is, I think, event related, right? Overseer personal effects is another type of ratting loot or event loot, as you can see here. This is the Christmas event that just injects massive amounts of ISKs. Like Christmas, the Christmas event is the problem with inflation. If we ever have a problem, the Christmas event is it. Red loot, so Triclavian data, is only part of what comes out of Abyssal Space, so it's not a huge issue. And it's also very, very steady, as you can see here. Bounties, you know, nobody's ratting anymore. And rogue drone analysis data is also basically irrelevant. Crota, arguably moving PI to Omega only caused supply constraints in PI, and so supply shock inflation like supply chains in real life over COVID. Yes. What do you mean by moving PI to Omega? Like back in the day when you couldn't do PI as an alpha anymore? Yeah. I mean, we've had our fair share of supply chain issues with PI, I think, which, you know, they're now trying to alleviate by reducing the volume by half in PI goods. But yeah, I am this close to jumping back in PI actually. I wish Belt. We shall be Scrooge, ban Christmas. And I have been calling for a curbing to that for a long time. But it's so as your PI is planetary interaction. It's the or planetary industry as it's called now. Absolutely, Adamar. Good to see you, Adamar, by the way. It's the only way to create PI goods, so that's important. Sorry, I'm using a lot of abbreviations, and today is not my usually stream day, so I am acutely aware that we might have some people here that are not usually here and may not be as versed in the industry. By the way, I noticed that I had the stream labels on top not activated, but they are now. So thanks for subscribing or gifting subs up there. It's now updated. Pretty new, trying to figure out what you're saying. Yeah, it's all right. Ask questions. Today it's not my regular, like on Saturday I have a big show that has guests and everything every Saturday. But when I stream like this during the week on Monday, it's just a chill discussion stream. So feel free to ask any questions whatsoever. Harry Eve, welcome. By the way, if you haven't noticed, I redistributed VIP badges. So there should be some people that now have VIP badges that you can see, like Harry Eve has there. If you haven't noticed, you might find out now that you're a VIP. So this is sinks and faucets over time. Here you can see that, for example, you know, like massive extractor sales. That's what you're seeing here with massive transaction tax hits right here. Transaction tax was now halved because of the holiday, the tax holiday. Now, you know, that's what I mentioned earlier. Skills and blueprints, they were apparently for the expansion. A lot of people returned and were buying a lot of skills and blueprints from NPC orders. That has also gone down, and everything else is pretty unchanged. We're just seeing here that the blue loot apparently has been curbed a little bit at the end of the last month, but it was going nuts here. I mean, it was going absolutely nuts. I'm sitting at around 1 billion ISK, and the orders are getting out of control. People buy only a few of my items before they get a bit and have a ton of open orders. So, there's I'll give you a tip. All right, so it's not about I think one mistake that people do in trading often is as they get more money, they just do more orders. And more capital doesn't have to mean more orders, right? Like more orders is not better, right? What you have to do is you have to pick new items. You just, your only limit, like you can do the exact same thing, just use items that have a higher daily trade volume. So just look at the daily trade volume of an item and stop trading in everything that you've traded before that is not working, and just move up an entire category. And so what that will mean is you'll have the same amount of orders, the same amount of work. You'll just be making even maybe, if you're lucky, the same margin, but the net profit will be higher. So don't just do more orders. That's how you burn out. Oz, how did you get through the standing grind? I found it to be a great excuse not to try trading. It doesn't matter, man. It doesn't matter. I mean, it used to not like just do a little bit. Do the career missions, do a few hauling missions here and there, and then you're halfway there, and then it's good enough, man. It's good. You don't like when people say you need to have perfect standings. That's complete bullshit. Don't listen to them. Just go trade. I trade with 4 trillion and I don't have perfect standings. I don't care. It's the last point, 0.1, 0.2 percent, and that's not going to matter. But yeah, there's some easy ways you can do it. You can even pay people to do it. Yeah, Zippo, don't worry about it. Scrota says, slow moving, high margin is the way to go. No need for standings with high margins. That's true. There's various strategies that don't require standings as badly. Okay, so that's that. Let's see. I don't care. Here's the one that Golden wanted to look at. So Golden Sound, I hope you're still there. We're talking about you now. This is the money supply overall, and this is what he was referring to. Thank you for the raid, Arhont Sibirski. Thank you for stopping by with your 81 viewers. We're talking about the MER. So this is economics. If graphs and spreadsheets aren't your thing, then run. But if they are, or if you just want to hang out and learn a little bit, then absolutely stay. I like how depressive voice. Hi, welcome. You just came in, but you also have the stream muted. So I like how depressive voice has the stream muted. There's also 3 minutes left on a raffle if you want to win some Omega codes. So ! Raffle. So yes, the total money supply has increased rather sharply over the last 4 or 5 months. But this also is because we had 2 expansions very quickly in a row, and that means returning players here, and that means returning players here. And so that's not like the ISK that enters the game by returning players isn't all that concerning. It could mean that there's a little bit of a higher push on prices because of more people competing, but generally it's fine. So I'm not worried when I'm looking at this, like not at all. Especially because of this. I explained to you guys earlier that the ISK velocity is a big part of inflation. So as long as the ISK velocity goes down and is not really changing all that much, we're not going to have a ton of inflation in EVE Online. If we do, if we do have inflation, then what that would mean is that the value of ISK would depreciate, right? So what you need to do to protect yourself against inflation is just you need to buy goods. So just make sure, if you think there's a lot of inflation going on, and if you see the first signs about inflation, then just invest into assets and sit on them, right? Plex is one thing to do, but you can it can really be anything, right? Buy some Dead Space items, buying Fedos against inflation, yeah. So yeah, ISK velocity has been increasing, but not really all that much. Especially if you take out contracts and Plex, it's flat. So the higher ISK velocity is because of sales that CCP does on Plex and extractors. Economic indices. I mean, this is kind of interesting because, you know, we're if we're looking at these various item categories, then they tell you about what the price level is of these, right? And so if we're looking at something like the MPI, for example, the MPI is the mineral price index. Those are all the basic minerals, like your Mexilon, your titanium, your pyrite, and that is, you know, trading at like 240 on this index. However, that is compared to, you know, 2004 pricing. So you saw the huge spike here. That is right here. That is scarcity. Where, you know, the amount was just highly restricted. Resource redistribution made that go down a little bit, and now it's very high again. But a big part of that is also Isogen, right? Isogen is still a massive bottleneck compared to where it used to be. Even the 900% increase of certain asteroids in LowSec that we saw in a recent patch, it's only brought it down from 600 to 500 Isogen, so it just hasn't alleviated it that much. But you know, having said that, the impact is there, but certainly CCP is aware, as you could see from the interview that I did with CCP Psych on Saturday. We talked about these bottlenecks a little bit, and you can definitely see this going down in the future because CCP wants it to go down, and it should go down. It's just bottlenecks. Isogen 450, okay, nice. Megasite seems to be on a bit of a tear as well. I mean, that's something you have to realize, right? Something will always be the bottleneck. Something will absolutely always be the bottleneck because there's no economic system without a bottleneck. The question is, you know, how big is the bottleneck and how vital is that item in terms of, you know, substitution goods. You know, is there other things that people can buy to replace that final good? And so, you know, it's just interesting. But yes, the MPI is still very high. Although I can't tell you that I'm able to replicate something like this. Right? This is like they're still doing something weird, funny with the numbers here, because I can't replicate this index right here. The primary production index, the blue thing right here, is, you know, moon materials, ores, ice, P0, P1 planetary materials, data cores, decryptors, blueprints, that sort of stuff. And that's in here, and that's basically at, you know, it's at 120, but it's fluctuating around 0, right? So at around 100. What's a little bit higher is the secondary producer index, and that's components, so like tier 2, tier 3 components, station components, planetary commodities, that sort of stuff, like the non-P0, P1 planetary commodities. And that seems to have gone down a little bit. Prices are still high. They've been driven up by increased production over the expansions, the 2 expansions that we've been seeing. Hi, Computerspiel. And then lastly, we have the CPI, which is the Consumer Price Index, and that just doesn't make a lot of sense because yes, we have ships, modules, and rigs, like all final goods in there, but you also have skins in there and some some stuff that is just going to just really mess with the pricing. So this just never moves. So you can just ignore the CPI. It doesn't have any value. Since 2018, this shows very clearly that they're all pretty normal, and then the minerals are just very expensive. There are materials that don't hit the JITA markets, absolutely. But the higher the price in the JITA market, the less likely it is going to, be sold cheaper somewhere else. At some point, people are going to take the opportunity cost of taking it to JITA. And I realize that, a lot of alliances are self-sufficient, and they might just, keep it internally and not care about JITA pricing. But, there's always, it's always an opportunity cost. JITA, selling in JITA is always an opportunity cost. This just goes into detail about each of these indices. Not going to cover that here. I want to just show this one, which again, so this, we're now at 18, 19, around 20 trillion in blue loot coming out of wormholes. I was a bit surprised. I was a bit surprised that if you watched the Meta Show last week, Mark Resurrector seemed to be very jealous of the, just 100 billion that somebody, a tier 2 alliance, would get out of the TTT agreement. I was always under the impression that Mark Resurrectors was running a wormhole corp, but they must not be crabbing very well, because there are people crabbing massive amounts of ISK out of wormholes, and it doesn't seem to be Mark. It doesn't. So I'm sorry, man. Like you must be doing something wrong. Like what's up, dude? I guess we'll have Mark on one of the next on the next Saturday shows, and we'll ask him about it. Yeah, this must be concentrated in very few hands. So I don't really see I see the difference between TTT income and blue loot, right? However, I can't believe people would complain about the 1 to 2 trillion that are split up between 5 to 10 parties out of the TTT, when there's, I don't know, probably fewer parties taking out 20 trillion every month out of wormholes. This is absolutely insane. There must be some insanely rich wormholers. There must be some insanely rich wormholes. It doesn't even compare to I'm pretty sure there are some smaller wormhole alliances that are richer than the null blocks. Then again, there's probably also a lot of null blocks crabbing in C5, C6 wormholes, if you ask me. So, all right. I think that's it. Largest battle, schmattle, and that's it. So that's the MER.